During this tutorial we're going to talk about gas power cycles. This occurs in a reciprocating engine. This is, for instance, a cylinder which has a piston, and the piston is reciprocating such that it goes upwards, downwards, upward, downwards. There is, for instance, an intake valve, and there is an exhaust valve, and usually we're introducing air. Actual engines will have, for instance, a mixture between air and, for instance, a hydrocarbon, which might be gasoline, for instance. The mixture enters in the intake valve, and then it will go out in the exhaust valve. And there are two important, for instance, limits of volume. The first one is the top dead center, and the second one is what we call, for instance, the maximum volume, which is the bottom dead center. So the top dead center is the minimum volume in the reciprocating engine, while the bottom dead center is, for instance, the maximum volume. And we can have a compression ratio, and the compression ratio is going to be, for instance, the maximum volume, the bottom dead center, over the minimum volume, which is the top dead center, and this is always higher than 1. We have two types of engines. The one is a spark ignition engine. For instance, this spark ignition engine is an engine which has, for instance, its two exhaust and intake valve, but the situation here is that the mixture is going to be compressed into a state where the temperature at the very end is going to be lower than the temperature of the auto ignition. So since it will not ignite by itself, you need, for instance, an external spark in order to perform the combustion. This, for instance, is the Otto cycle, which we're going to discuss later on, and is very common in automotive engines, for instance, in cars. Another type of engine is, for instance, the compression ignition engines, where the temperature is going to be, for instance, you're going to compress it to a temperature where it's going to be, for instance, higher than the temperature of auto ignition, and thus you don't need an external spark or an external source in order to perform the combustion, because it will ignite by itself due to this situation. And a very important is the diesel cycle, which is also commonly used in the automotive industry. So two kinds of engines, reciprocating engines.